Ruchem Abon B'Shem Hashem. Shem Issur Torah. We'd like to welcome everyone to today's shiur from Rabbi Yakov Shlita and Dine Neres Machshirei Chashmalim Yomtov. Lights and electric appliances on Yomtov. So the great source of sponsoring a shiur. Call Issur Torah 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Harav Smith.
Learning halachos Yomtov is always challenging. It's very difficult to sugya, but particularly when we talk about the new Yomtov that we have, the Yomtov with the appliances, whether it's ovens, urns, crackpots, etc., it becomes that much more challenging. So I'm going to try today, Be'ez Hashem, to give the yisaidis of the urn, crackpot, oven, and etc. on Shabbos, and then how it applies to Yomtov. So one thing we have to clarify: the malacha deraisa of havara, which lesson of making a fire. In the Mishkan, actually, they made the fire for the Urias. But Lamaisa, the issur of making a fire on Shabbos is lav dafka creating a new fire. There's no doubt about it. Someone lights one candle from the other on Shabbos, he's machal Shabbos with deraisa. That's havara. He raises the temperature, the setting of his stovetop, it makes it a little higher. So that's malacha deraisa. That's why we have a blech, shem yechata. It was already a fire, but the issur havara on Shabbos is lav dafka creating a fire. It's even increasing a fire. And we seem to be convinced on Yom Tov that there's a chiluk. To light a match, we seem to feel is awesome. But to take a candle and light another candle, or raise the setting of the stovetop, that's mutter. In fact, imagine someone, I'll give you a mashal, he went to the mountains for Sukkot. This year, Sukkot is late in the season, it'll be cold, and Pashut is getting cold. And he didn't put enough of a heating element to cook the food. He has a great idea. He has a fireplace in his bungalow, he has stocked with wood. So he takes a candle, holds it next to the fireplace, and it could be in an hour or two he'll have a big burning fireplace, he'll have heat, he'll be able to cook, he can make a campfire. I think that's perfectly mutter on Yom Tov. So the question is, how could it be? If you tell me havara on Yom Tov is also you can't create a new fire, so how could you make a fireplace? So we say, oh, come on, that's not kasha. The difference is creating a fire, striking a match, putting on a stovetop, or transferring. Transferring is okay, but that's fancy English. What does it have to do with anything? How do you explain why, in fact, is that so that creating is asa and transferring is mutter? So one thing we know, there's no doubt about it, that Yom Tov havara is mutter. The pasuk says, actually, it's 12 places in the Torah that the Torah says oichel nefesh is mutter. But the general klal is kol malacha lo yasa. Don't forget, Yom Tov is not weekday. Yom Tov is asa. But there's a tremendous heter called oichel nefesh. What is the most oichel nefesh malach of all the malachis? No doubt about it. Havara. You have to make a fire. You have to cook the food. And that's why the Shulchan Aruch begins Hilchos Yom Tov Tav Sadek Kei Aleph. Whatever is asa on Shabbos is asa on Yom Tov. That's rule number one. Except for oichel nefesh and hoitzah and havara. So no doubt about it, havara on Yom Tov is mutter midaraisa. In fact, the Mechilta in the beginning of Parashat Yakov has a beautiful remez. Lo yisavar eish b'chol ma'ish v'seichem b'yoyim haShabbos. Shabbos is asa, Yom Tov is mutter. But we find an even bigger heter regarding havara. And that's the mashal I just told you. Let's say someone lights, he doesn't light the fireplace actually, but he takes a candle and he ignites the fireplace. So that's mutter. You're not eating the fireplace, you're not cooking with it. But to keep warm is also mutter. To light a candle to be able to learn is also mutter. Why? So this is the chiddush of mitoich. That's the Shulchan Aruch Tafkuf Yud Ches. Not only is havara and carrying mutter l'tzarech oichel nefesh, but even if it's non-oichel nefesh, if it's a tzarech hayom tiv, to learn, to keep warm, you'll have to carry your lulav to shul. All these things are mitoich, even not oichel nefesh. So now you're really wondering, so this doesn't make sense. You're allowed to make a fire, even non-oichel nefesh. So what's the problem of creating a fire? But Lamais, it's a Mishnah. The Mishnah in Be'er Daf Lamed Gimel, you cannot create a fire from any source. From a eitzim, use a magnifying glass to make a fire is awesome. But the question is, Manashtana. You say the terms of creating versus transferring, what's pshat? So it's an excellent question. This is the Gemara's kasha. Frag the Gemara in Be'er Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, might see in my timer. I thought Avar is mutter. Mishum de kamoylid b'yomtiv. The issa is not havara. The issa is creating the kamoylid. You're creating a fire on yomtiv. Now, what does that mean, moylid? So this we discussed not long ago. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Nun Alf Mebeis, Ein meraskin loyas hashelik v'loyas haboret. You can't take ice or snow and crush it to make water. Why not? Zok Rashi, Mishum de kamoylid, you're creating water from ice. V'domi l'malacha sheboirei hamayim o'elu. This is a issur d'Rabbanan called moylid. Moylid is a verb. To take one item, ice, crush it to make water because you want to wash your hands is not a malacha d'oraisa. What's the malacha d'oraisa? But to create something on Shabbos is an issur d'Rabbanan. Rashi says it's too close to malacha. So the Shulchan Atzei Shittim explains it's too close to the issur of makah b'patish. You're creating water. I once saw this with my own eyes. I was in Monsey for Shabbos, a place where there was within an Erev, and someone was running up to Mincha, Shabbos afternoon. So I guess he wanted to be, what we say, sticky. So instead of washing his hands with the water by the sink, on the way in, he grabbed a handful of snow and rubbed his hands with the snow. So he was yoisin until Shadayim for Mincha. But he's also made it to a Beferish Gemara. Because on the Gemara, Ein meraskin loyas hasheleg, Taisa says this very story. Someone that takes snow to wash his hands is Oyvan Istar Banan of Moilid. So he was Yaitza, the din of Natil Shadayim for Tefillah, but it's Mechal Shabbos Midrabanan. But the point is, Moilid is not a malacha d'oraisa. In fact, there's another example of Moilid in Beyach of Gimel. To put something that gives a good scent, that's good smell, you're Moilid Reach. Oh, so now we have the clarity, and now it's very simple. If you have an existing fire and you transfer it to another candle, you're not moiled. That's transferring. But as the Rav on Mishnayis, Mishnah Perek Dal, the Mishnah Zayin, where explains Ein Moitzi and you can't make a fire, what's wrong? The Domli Malacha Sheboir Ha'esh Hazeh B'Yomtiv. When we could say you created a fire, you're in trouble. When you transfer a fire, Eish Me Eish, so it's not moiled. So using a match, and if you scratch the match, you are creating a fire. But transferring from a lit candle even to a fireplace is transferring and not being moiled. Now what's noteworthy, the Rambam in Perek Dal Aloch Aleph Hilchos Yomtiv, the Rambam says in Ein Moitzi and Esa'esh, Sherei Efshel Lahamtzi Oisai Mi Bo'erev. Says the Rambam, you know what the problem with making a fire on Yom Tov is? It's the basic klal that malacha that shaykh to do Erev Yom Tov, you can't do on Yom Tov. I think I'll give you two good examples. One of them, B'didi Havi Uvda, one of my neighbors had actually a fig tree growing in his backyard. And it ripened right before Rosh Hashanah. And every year he would bring me fresh figs from his tree, and I felt confident to make a shechianu because this is a real shechianu. I see it with my own eyes. One year, Rosh Hashanah, he forgot to cut off the figs from the tree. Can he pull off the figs l'tzarich oichel nefesh on Yom Tov? So this is actually a Gemara in Be'er Daf Beis Amud Beis that kaitza is not mutar Yom Tov. Why? Efshemi boyjoyim. It's also another sugi in Beyach of Gimel, trapping, teda. Even though you're trapping an animal to eat it, and you're allowed to shech, you're allowed to cook, but teda is efshemi boyjoyim. So now we can understand, like the Rambam, a different reason to differentiate. Because making a fire, you can make before Yom Tov. But it doesn't last forever. Don't forget, we put on a fire, a light, and it burns 2 days, 3 days. In those days, they made a fire, they had to maintain it. So making the fire was efshemi b'yom. Maintaining it, adding to it, was not efsha, and that was mutter on Yomtov itself. Now, there's a lot to talk about the Rambam. If you're the Lumbus, is not for now. But the question is the Rambam argue on the Gemara? Chas v'sholem. But one thing I will tell you, what's Negeil Alocha, as we'll soon see, the Taz and Our Sim and Tuf Kuf Beis, Sif Kat and Aleph points out, like the Rambam, making a fire, creating a fire is Malacha D'Oraisa. Just like Tzeda and the Kaitza is Malacha D'Oraisa. Now, Lamaisa, the Shulchan Aruch in Our Simon says you can't make a fire, and the Bialacha sets the record straight, and he says it's an issur d'Rabbanan to make a fire on Yom Tiv. The Taz holds it's D'Oraisa, but like the Rav that I just mentioned, the Bar Tanura, that the issur is moilid, it's only an issur d'Rabbanan. Now, Baruch Hashem, we have a better understanding. Let's apply it to many shaylas. So I'll start with a perfect illustration that will show the sugya in all its clarity. Let's say someone wants to cook on his stovetop, and he forgot to put on the fire. He put the oven on, forgot to put on the fire. Is it mutter on Yom Tiv to turn the knob, and the fire on the stovetop will go on? You want to boil water on with a kettle. So watch this. You'll ask a young Talmud Chacham, you'll ask your child or grandchild, you say, Chas v'sholem. You'll ask an older person, he says, I remember the Rav told me you're allowed to. Not a machlokes. Pashut. Let me explain. Today, putting on a stovetop is being moiled eish, because there is no pilot, and when you're turning it, actually a double malacha. First, the electric ignition makes a spark, and that creates the fire. So putting on a stovetop is like lighting a match. But older people remember, and some still have it, even though it's really against the law, that they had pilots. A pilot had actually 4 pilots by each range. And basically, the pilot was a regular fire. And when you put on the stovetop, you didn't put on the stovetop. You transferred from this pilot to the grate that you wanted to cook with. So every time you put on a fire on Yom Tiv with the old-fashioned stovetops, you are transferring eish me eish. You're enlarging it, you're allowed to enlarge it, that's no problem. So the truth is the government disallowed it because it burns too much gas. So now we are back to a problem with a stovetop. Is it taka any eitzah to put on the stovetop on Yom Tiv? So again, there are 2 problems. The actual electric ignition is using a malacha of electricity, and then you're making a fire. So, but I think it's kedai to highlight this, that you have to know the metzias. It looks like the same. It's the same cooking. The cook is not the problem with the stovetop. It's the making the fire. So the klal number 1 that we have to apply to all shilas is you have to know things are changing. Technology is changing. What I'm saying today about an oven, tomorrow could be different. So the klal I would advise, which I live with, is if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. If you know exactly how it works, we'll soon see. Someone just asked me a shayla. I was amazed. He says he noticed after a while, when he opens the refrigerator, when he keeps it open long enough, alarm rings, a bell rings, whatever. So he discovered America, he thinks. Many new refrigerators have, when you open the door, we don't want you to open too long, so a timer starts to go, and if you open too long, a bell rings, like, close it. So every time you open a refrigerator on a regular Monday morning, you're activating a sensor. People have freezers, a sub-zero refrigerator, freezer. Whenever you open the door, you put on a fan to keep the cool air. So you have to know what you're doing. But one thing I will tell you, if you have any type of a stovetop today that is not the old-fashioned gas stovetop, you have a problem of putting it on Yom Tov. Is there an eitzah? So let me be very clear, there are eitzahs, but make sure it applies to your particular case. First of all, some stovetops have a feature that if you push it in and turn it, then you ignite the electric ignition. But if you just turn it without pushing it in, there's no electric ignition. What you're only doing is you're feeding gas, which is dangerous, but that's okay. If your type, and how do you know your type? You go home today and try it out. Mine happens to be if you don't push it in, it doesn't electric ignite. So what you could do is you could not push it in. Again, make sure you do before Yom Tov, make sure. Then you have a candle ready. When you put it on slightly, put it on to the end, so you have a smallest flame. Hold the candle next to the invisible gas, and then you have a fire. Now be careful, you keep the gas low and keep the gas on, chas v'shalom, it's dangerous and can make an explosion. So, but why do I tell you put it at the end? Very pashut. If you open it slightly and you put the candle next to the gas, you're going to have the big flame. And then you have a problem of making the flame smaller. But if you put it on small, you can work from small to big. There is another eitzah, and many people do this, but you have to know your metzias. Before Yomtov, they pull out the plug from the stovetop, from the gas range. Why? Because there's no more electric ignition. Now the chesar with that is, there's no more lights, there's no more digital display, there's no more clock. So you have to know about your shalom bayis if they go for that. But pulling out the plug, so you're basically neutralizing the electric ignition, and then you could go to the old-fashioned way, being moitzi eish, mi eish, hold the candle next to the gas. Now, the truth is technically, could be on Yom Tov, also you could pull out the plug. Because right now, the unit is off. The plug is muktzah, so you'll do it kalachayad with your foot. But almost all cases of a stovetop, there's a digital display, there's a light. Pulling out the plug, you're closing a light. So you have to know what you're doing. But if you know the only thing that happens when you pull out the plug is you're disconnecting the plug, but nothing is being detached or disconnected, then even on Yom Tov, it's mutter to pull out the plug. The Chazon Ish writes in a letter, a mistake in Metzias is worse than a mistake in Halacha. So you have to know the Metzias and approach with caution. Another perfect example of our Shaila, of our Yisoid, Ma'aseh Shehaya, someone had an urn for Yom Tov, he pushed it, forgot to plug it, to put it on. In other words, he plugged it in, filled it up, forgot to put it on. So I guess he had a little of an agiyas, but he innocently made a mistake that Bishul on Yom Tov is mutter. So what's wrong with putting on the urn? And then he was told that he was Mechal Yom Tov, because the problem was not the Bishul of the water. The problem is he's putting on the heating element, the coil in the urn. So he made a mistake. Question, can he use the water? The Maisa, he was Mechal Yom Tov. So in Hilchas Shabbos, Shin Yud Ches, in the beginning we find, if you do a malacha on Shabbos, it's asa loy u l'cheir. There's a difference, mezid and shoygig. But the Ramah says, even b'shoygig, it's asa boy bayoim, gam l'cheir. L'cheira, the same should be regarding Yom Tov. And indeed, according to the Rambam, that havara on Yom Tov is the raisa, this type of havara, it would be asabana. But says the Magid Mishnah, quoted by the Magen Avram, the Rab, and Mishnah Berurah, since we paskin like the pashas of the Gemara, that havara is only a darabanan al t'moilid. So as the Rab explains, Chazal didn't asa a shoygig darabanan combination. Shabbos, that's the raisa, so shoygig is bad enough. But on Yom Tov, this double combination adds up to a heta b'di'evet. Now, lamaisa, this is the shita, even though the Taz would hold that it's asa, but says the Shevet Alevi, Chelik Yural, Simon Kuf Chav Ches, the sugya, the alma is like not like the Taz, it's only the Rabbanan, and the Mokoim shoygig, it would be mutter to have hana. So again, you see simple Yisoid that gives us a lot of guidance. The havara on Yom Tov is mutter midaraisa. Even the worst scenario, making a fire, is a Rabbanan al t'moilid. Question. Someone had a stovetop that was on, or a appliance that was on, and lamaisa, it was unplugged. With children, it's easy to understand. It happens in a sukkah, the lights, you plug it in, but someone walked by. Bekitza, he did everything he did before Yom Tov, and everything was going nicely. Someone pulled out the plug, it went off. Is there any heta for him to put on that appliance on Yom Tov? You're wondering, are you talking? What's the heta for him? But I'll tell you, if we hold like the Rambam, that the Ikke Issa is Efshe Erev Yom Tov, says the Berkei Yosef in our Simon Chief Cotton Aleph, maybe in this case it's Efshe, because he did it. Something happened. So he wants to say, but his lashon is, if someone was in jail and he was released erev Yom before the Zman, or someone was in a midbar and it was efsha to make a fire before Yom Tov, whatever the circumstances were, it will be mutter to make a fire on Yom Tov ayidei Yisrael. However, most reject this, and you can understand why. Because we go be'ikin the din that the issa is not because it's efsha b'vayjoyim. The ik is moilid. And therefore, argues the Kaf HaChaim, Sif Cotton Beis, the Shevet Alevi, Tov, Chelik Tes, Simon Kuf Chavav, that we go with moilid. And with moilid, there's no difference, efsha and efsha. What I found beautiful, the Minchas Yitzkin, Chelik Dal, Simon Sadik Tes, he has this shayla. He lit it, and someone pulled out the plug. So he says, why did the Birkei Yosef have two very unusual mashalim? He was in jail or a midbar. Why don't you say that it went out, which happens all the time? The gas range goes out. So he says, because the klal is, we don't make exceptions. He could have done it. Lamaisa, it's off now. Midbar and jail is a milsalai shchicha. That like goes with barabanan. But our case that it was on and went off, that's a regular case, and we don't make exceptions, because yisoid, it's efshemi boijoy. So my point only is, although you might see some that are makel, but our poskim say very strongly, in fact, the Ber Moshe, the Betzina Rav Chelik Ches, Kuf Samach Vav, and you see how the approach to Yomtov, someone asked them, they had no fire whatsoever. They had a crackpot on, but they had no eish. And for some reason, they couldn't get any fire from a neighbor, which typically you do. So, was it better they didn't light, which they didn't, or for that they would light because they have no choice? So the Betzina Rav told them, you're not allowed to light a fire on Yom Tov. Better don't light, you're an oinus. But the Maisa, Havara, creating a fire is not mutter, even the Mokkah mitzvah of Hadlokis neighbors. Now, the truth is today, Baruch Hashem, we have neighbors, and even if you don't have a fire, you go to a neighbor, there's always a fire available, the shul has a fire. But the point is not to be mezalzel in the issur of Yom Tov. I did see one point who may concern. The Shmir Shabbos, in Hora Kufchav, in Perik Beis, or Kufchav Ches, says that Lamaisa, if someone has a choil at home, and he needs to consult with a doctor, and the doctor, he knows, picks up the phone on Yom Tov, which many doctors do. So to make a phone call, even on the Yisrael is mutter. So he was talking even in his times, when you made a phone call, there's a light lit up in the company itself. Today there's no lights. But even though you're putting on a light, but this would be l'tzarech choila, it would be mutter and overlooking the fact that you're creating a light. So Lamaisa, there is certain allowance of moilid, electricity, for a choila she'ein by sakon. Now, of course, it has to be within reason, but basically the site is moilid on Yom Tov is asami d'Rabbanan. A very common question is when you need the urn, oven, stovetop, crockpot, v'chulu, air conditioner, heater, whatever. You need it to be on Yom Tov. It's not on. And for you to do it is asa. It's moilid. When and how is it mutter to have a guy do it? So first of all, again, you have to think. To have a guy put on the crockpot, forget about the issa of Yom Tov, it's bishalakim. I'm talking about there's no bishalakim. So the emes is, on Shabbos, we find twice in Shulchan Aruch, Shin Zayin Hey, Reish Ayin Vav Beis, that even though it's Tzarech Shabbos, you need a challenge for Shabbos, but to have a guy do a malacha deraisa is awesome. Because a guy doesn't do malacha deraisa for Yisrael. Does that mean hu adin Yom Tov? The answer is absolutely not. Because we know why. Because on Yom Tov, the worst scenario, moilid, is only d'Rabbanan. So if you need hot water for Yom Tov, and for you it's a tzarech Yom Tov, to have a guy put on the urn would be mutter. Why? Because at most it's an issur banan of moilid. Amir la'akum is a shvus. Shvus to shvus, b'makay mitzvah is mutter. And as early as the Prima Godim in Tshuva Sefer Megiddo Siman Kuf Yud, he taka says it. And it's so beautiful when you have the original Yisod, everything fits in beautifully. He's like the Rambam, that's an issur deraisa moilid, you can have a guy do it. But L'didan, he says, a very mild lashon, ain't ligur boy, the one that's mekel. Because it will be a shvus to shvus. Now, Lamaisa, people got them, that was his Gaval Ganov. He always said F Sha'ulai. He was not Kiblu Daiti type, but the Marsham and Chelik Dalakov, Mem Gimel, the Shevet Alevi, the Ber Moish, the Orletzir, Rabbi Kamenetsky, a whole list of Paiskim, all say we could rely on this attitude. For a guy to do Havara, which at most is only the Rabbanan, is Mutlet Tzarech Yomtiv. The Mishnah Berurah, in a different context, Taf Kuf Yud, Siv Katan Chav Gimel, with the Sharatzian, says Beferish, that we do rely when there's a Tzarech Yomtiv on a guy being asked to do an issur the Rabbanan. And a perfect example would be our case of Havara. So Lamaisa, this is why Lamashal, I'll give you a mashal, this coming Sukkot Abolein Toiva, it's going to be very late in the season, it's going to be in the middle of October. So let's say someone's sitting in the sukkah and it's getting cold. And he didn't put on a heater. Well, he could go into the house and he's mitzvah, but he wants to sit in the sukkah. So it would be mutter to have a guy plug in the heater, even though putting on a heater on Shabbos is malacha deraisa. You're heating the coils. But this would be a shvus to shvus, b'makei mitzvah, because he doesn't want to eat in the house, he wants to eat in the sukkah. That's the chayur pasha. The next group of questions is how to transfer a fire. So here again we see how, if you just pay careful detail, everything fits in beautifully. No doubt about it, if there's a burning fire, you could take a piece of wood, put it into the fire, and walk with that fire to use it elsewhere. But today we have something called a match. Now how does a match work when you scratch the match? So there's a little sulfur on the tip, and with some abrasion, it starts to burn. So the question is, are you allowed to strike a match on Yomtiv? No fire. Make the match and make the fire from the match. So the Mishnah Berurah, an earlier place can speak about a shvebela, which is Yiddish for a match, and that's creating a fire. Now the Sholem Meshiv in Chelik Shesisa, Medura Shesisa, which is Chelik Vav, Simon Samach Bey says an incredible chiddush, and he reasons that he calls them tzindlach, but the same idea, that Lamaisa, if you could scratch the match without a fire and it burns, then it must be the sulfur has some type of fire potential. So therefore, it's considered eish mi eish. But the Paiskim do not accept this, and it's very hard to understand. What do you mean? That's the chemical reaction, but there's no eish. So Lamaisa, to scratch a match and light a match is vadei asa. How about taking what people do, take the match and stick it into the stovetop, so you don't have to scratch it, you put it in. So l'chor, that's a valid transfer. You're moving the fire from the stovetop onto your match. Now someone told me when he was in Eretz Yisrael, he heard a chiddush, and I found it recently, so Yankel Fish in his new sefer, they quote him as saying that l'maisa, even if you put it into a fire mamish, but l'maisa, you're creating a new fire. The new fire is because of the sulfur. So he said, this person told me his minig was he would put the match in, but the other side. Okay, but l'maisa it's a chiddush because the Paiskim say sulfur is not eish. So what you're doing is you're using a better type of wood to transfer the fire. So I think the minig oilam is you do put the match in straight, but if you want to be machmer, put it on the other side. Make of it hapachu, and you're okay. Now what's interesting is, the question for today is, today many people have electric stovetops. Can you take a match and put it onto the hot coil? Be careful, of course, and that will ignite it instantly. So Rav Moshe in Chelik Dal in Yeridea, Chelik Beis Ayin Hey, he reasons that since the electric coil is considered eish, l'gabi kol halachos, plugging it in, it's bishul, so putting your match on the coil is like putting it on eish. Now the Paiskim say that you could be saimach on, but if you're afraid to put it onto the coil, and you hold it a little slightly above, so you know why the match is igniting? Not because of the fire, because of the heat. So that's considered being moitzi eish. It's not the fire, it's the heat of the fire. Now I want to tell you, last night I found this in Shevet Alevi Chelik Yud Aleph, Kuf Chav Ches, he reasons that even putting a match even onto the electric coil is not mutter. Because he held it's not eish. I mean, it is eish in halacha, but it's not the chemical eish that will permit transfer. But so, if you want to be machal like Arvazna, Tavel Lecha Bracha, but Moshe did hold that it's mutter, but at least that much I could say. Hold it close, hold it on, put it onto the coil, so it's eish, you're doing it from the eish itself. Lighting of course, lighting a tzindar that we have today, or today it's a lighter or a tzindar, so that itself is a malacha, that's creating a fire. Lighting a candle from a cigarette is the same. Is also, there is enough of an eish that would be considered eish mi eish. I'm not getting into cigarettes on Yomtov, which is a problem, but this, the price say, the eish of the cigarette, it will be enough. Part 2 is really fascinating because, again, just once you have the understanding of the Metzias and halacha, it should be pretty simple. And that is the use of urns, crockpots, ovens, lights with a dimmer, raising the current of electricity. Basically, let us apply this more specifically to various appliances that we have in our kitchen. And until now, we're talking about basically fire, magdal eish, transferring eish. So one thing I will tell you, that putting on any appliance is an issur d'Rabbanan of Moiled. Why? You look at it, what I mean, it's a glowing coal. You're putting on an urn, you're putting on a crock pot, that metal gets very, very hot. True. But it's not worse than creating a fire on Yomtov, which is all an issur d'Rabbanan. Now, but you have to realize, like the Chazon Ish, famous Chazon Ish, that putting on an appliance on Shabbos is boina. So Yomtov boina is the same deraisa. And I saw the Orlotzian and the Stipa quotes to the Chazon Ish. So that's a little of a monkey wrench in the heta, but at least the Didan we're going to say that putting on any appliance is an issur d'Rabbanan of Moiled. The Psalm Zalman in Minchas Shleimah Siman Tes, the end of Anaf Beis, he says Pashut, that on Shabbos and Yomtov you're not to put on an appliance. The difference is Shabbos is the Raisa and Yomtov is the Rabbanan. Now, why am I stressing this? I'll tell you, because I think it's an important point to bring out, because there's a little of a misunderstanding here. I saw at least 2 Heintige Svarim that say to put on appliance on Yomtov, although the Aruch HaShulchan was Mekel, but we're not knowing like the Aruch HaShulchan. I think that's inaccurate and maybe misleading. Now let me explain you a little of the facts. I heard from a very choshev yid. His mother grew up in the East Side, the early 1900s. She was a very erlicha woman, but she said the minig was, quote unquote, in the East Side in the early 1900s, when they had electricity, they held you allowed to put on a light on Yomtov. Shabbos is awesome, Yomtov's mutter. So let me tell you the source of that. You have to realize, you're living in a world and all of a sudden you put on a switch and a light goes on. The first reaction is it must be kishuf. How's electricity work? You put up, it doesn't make sense. So at first they were grappling, mamish groping in darkness. The Aruch HaShulchan, not in a sefer, but he was asked a question and he responded in a certain kunches beis vad lechachamim. He said, and I'll quote a lashon, "Nerali is daite lahater lefi avanasi b'moleches holektri she'ene metzuya b'roiv ha'orim." We don't have it in our. He lived in a vardik. They didn't have electricity. She'nucha lamed b'dig al toitza oisa. In other words, I don't know the metzias, but the way you tell me, it seems it's mutter. Now listen, don't laugh, but listen. They described to the Aruch HaShulchan that when you put on electric light, there's the eish, the fire, the physical fire, the chemical fire in the electric company goes through the wires and puts on the light. So they understood, of course, it's almost a joke, that it's eish mi eish. So the Aruch HaShulchan responded, so then it's no different than putting on a gas range, stovetop, that has a pilot. But Lamaisa, they misinformed him. And the Betzina Rav in the Chelik Vav, Siman Chav Gimel, writes with great emphasis, Hashgacha Pratis, the Rebbe Shalom protected Aruch HaShulchan, that he didn't make a mistake. He said beferish, I don't know the Metzias, but the way you tell me, it seems he mutter. Because the Rebbe Shalom would not let a tzaddik like him to be nichshel. Because not that he made a mistake in the lumbus, because he was a big paisik. He was misinformed in the Metzias. So Lamaisa, there's no doubt about it. Aruch HaShulchan, had he known the Metzias, would have said it's asa gomer. It was just misinformed. You know, the same mistake that they believed that when you talk on the phone, your voice runs through the wires, which today is a joke because today there's not even wires in phones. But Lamaisa, I want to make this clear, and that's what Psalm Zalman brought out. It's not this a machlokes and we ignore the Aruch HaShulchan. All agree putting on appliance is a moilid. It's asa midrabanan. Now, but Lamaisa, once it's on, you could use appliances. You could use a humidifier on Yomtov to add water if a person has congested and he needs the vapor. In fact, you could even add cold water to a hot water vaporizer. As long as it's on, so it's doing malacha constantly. You're adding hot water or cold water to vaporizer on Shabbos is us als bishul. But Yomtov bishul is mutter. He's not drinking the water, but this is mitoich. Lamaisa, the oven is chayra, the same idea. Putting on an oven is the same idea like a stovetop. Some people still have it, but it used to be very popular, a gas oven, which meant when you put it on, you are transferring the fire from the pilot that goes into the oven. So then putting on the oven is not really putting on the oven. It's transferring the existing fire from the existing fire, that's the pilot. Today, most ovens don't have a pilot, the same problem. So putting it on would be a problem of moilid eish. Now, can you change the setting, increase the temperature of an appliance? For example, I'll give you a perfect example. You have a urn and you want to make it hotter. So you want to press the reboil button. But the water's already cooked and the unit is on, but you want it hotter. Or, even better mashal, you have a light with a dimmer. Now today, because of the new type of bulbs, they don't go well with the dimmers, but let's say you have a light and you turn it, as you turn the dial, it gets higher and higher. What's my shaila? Very pashut. Putting on a light is awesome. But how about increasing the intensity of it? So let me be clear. When sometimes you could raise the setting and there's a digital display that changes. You're changing the setting. So that's a problem. That's ksiva d'Rabbanan upon him. I'm talking about it's a no-frills item, unit. All you're doing is increasing the electricity that's being fed to your appliance that's on right now. So the emes is, some took the approach, which is not a bad idea. Since no one really knows this particular item, maybe there is a light, maybe there's a fan, who knows? Don't play games. You know, they said that someone has something rough once. He has a challenge on the far away from the fire. He wants to move it closer to the fire. So Satmar Rav says, "If fire on Shabbos, you tell me fire." Some people say don't adjust things because you're not sure what the metzias is. Now, of course, that's one way to do it. But if we could approach it with some degree of knowledge, we can know what really is mutter. So let me give you a perfect example where you have to know metzias. But this is unbelievable, and if you still have a fan in your house, you go home today and try it. I tried it. Let's say I have an old-fashioned box fan. Okay? It has 3 settings. It has high, low, and medium. Let's say I put it on low, but I need a little more. Can I put it from low to medium or high? So there's no electronic display. This is the most primitive as can be. It's a simple, you can't go wrong, right? Right? Wrong. I'll tell you why. When you change it from low to medium, any change, look at it, you'll see. You're closing the low mode and then putting it onto the medium mode. Varaya, if you do it slowly, it goes off. Every time you change a mechanical setting like this, the low, you have to close the low and make it medium. In fact, you look inside, there are 4 wires coming from the knob on top. You're closing low and putting on medium. So you're not doing anything as far as digital display, but you're closing the fan and putting it on again, which is not good to do a thing on Yomtov. And the same is true with those type of crock pots that have a button, low, and you click it to medium or high, whatever it is. It's closing the existing and creating a new one. So you're being kիבוי and הבערה. But I'm talking about a dimmer. A dimmer slides very gently. There's no clicking. A dimmer does not close off the light. It just increases the electricity that's being fed that brings more intensity to the light. So this, l'chayra, should be like adding oil to an existing fire, which on Shabbos, of course, is awesome midaraisa, but on Yomtov is mutter. I saw one of the classic Sivan, the Hilchos Mayadim, Amud Reish Samach Zayin. He says using a dimmer is not worse than adding wood to a fire. However, even that, you have to know, is not a klal gadol. I'll explain to you why. Let's say you want to make the water of the urn hotter. So you innocently just hit the reboil button, and assuming that there's no light changing. Now, there is a light change, but assuming there's no light changing. But let me tell you the metzias, and this is a simple metzias. In an urn, there are 2 independent coils. Actually, it's called the heating element, but we're going to use the word coil because it's easier to relate to. There's one coil that gets hot, that's always on. That will keep the water at a certain temperature. But when you want it hotter, so you hit the reboil button, you put on, you activate, you ignite the second coil. So by hitting the reboil button, you're putting on a new heating element. That's like putting on an urn from the beginning. Now, the way it works is when the water gets cooler and cooler, it automatically puts on the reboil button, which is fine. But for you to change it and hit that button, you're actually putting on an independent, separate coil that's an issur of havara, midrabana, like the Rambam's Deraisa.
If it has a turner, would you just turn it to a higher temperature?
By an urn?
Yes.
You have to know the machine.
The big cassettes.
You could go check it out. I don't know. I never saw such a thing. You could check it out.
All the good evolution have it, you know, big.
We'll get to that. I'll get to that. Good. We'll get to that in a minute. Perfect question. Very good. Now, the next question is the thermostat. Exactly. Now, Lamaisa, of course, thermostat works very differently. And I want to explain this. A thermostat is, and again, I'm not saying all, because whoever says that doesn't know what he's talking about, because how do I know all unless I saw all? I'm talking about, let's say, some type of urns or crock pots. It's set for 250. And you slide it, there's no resistance, no clicking, to 350. What happened at that moment? Absolutely nothing. Unless you have a digital display. But you don't. What happens? Nothing. Just, it's going to, at 250, it would have to burn for 5 minutes. You want it 350, you have to be patient. It'll take me 10 minutes. So that's called gram havara. And we'll soon see the Ramah is mekel mi'ikad din that gram havara on Yomtov is mutter. So if you know there's no digital change, and you know that you're not making an additional coil, it's just keeping it on longer, that would be mutter. Now this, if you want to see this chiluk, the Shmir Shabbos and Aleph Lamed Gimel, discusses if you add another coil versus just raising it. Rabbi has a beautiful tshuva in the Shulchan Alev, the end of Perek Tezvav, and makes this distinction. A thermostat is okay, because it's just making it longer, going longer, but you're not intensifying it at all. And the reboil and those type of things, you're putting on an independent coil, which is a problem. Now, this is the chayre the pshat. How about the dimmer, where there is a change right away? Is there any place that are machmir? So here I must tell you, it's a little uncertain to me, certainty b'chlal. But Ma'aser Rav Moshe Chelik Dalet Siman Pei Dalet regarding a microphone, using a microphone in shul, which then was the big problem. People wanted to use it. What's wrong? And one of the reasons is that when the microphone is on, it's using X amount of current. By talking, you're increasing current, and we don't know if the increasing current is the Deraisa or the Rabbanan. That's Shabbos. But many poskim, the Chalkas Yakov in Archaim Siman Ayin Beis, the Ber Moshe Chelik Vav Mem Ches, insist that increasing current could be also moiled. You're making the item with a greater function. And they point to an interesting Mishnah and Tafkuf Yudalv Sivka and Chavav, that even though you're not allowed to be moiled reach but begodim, let's say you have a little bit reach, you want to add more. Says the Mishnah Kadesh Yariach Yoisa is also moiled. So these poskim, including the Hilchas Chag B'Chag Amid Reish Samach Vav, they take the approach that it's possible increasing current is also moiled. Because till now, it was a dim light. Now it's a brilliant light. And especially you notice the difference, so you created a much more functional light. So I can't say all agree is mutter, but if you have just raising the intensity, in other words, like in a dimmer, we have this point. But your case, where it's just a thermostat, that nothing changes right away, it stays on for an extra 5 minutes, that's much more mutter. I must add another point, that the truth is every movement that we take, we make a little change in the current. The air conditioner is on, and I can walk into the room, and it's set for 67 degrees, and I'm 98.6. I'm also working a little harder. But that's negligible. We cannot say that's mamish negligible. But if you want to raise the current of a light, that might be more nicker that is moiled. So let me say this clearly. The thermostat is less of a problem. Raising the setting that changes it on the spot is a machlekes if raising the current is a malach of moiler or not. Next question, and I should mention it before we go to the next question actually, and that is the raising the thermostat of an oven, obviously, is only mutter when the oven is on. When it's on 250 and you raise to 350, you're going to put on the heating element, that's for sure, because it's not 350. So you have to be careful. We spoke about raising the temperature of the thermostat. That's when the oven is on. There's no digital display. And if it's just a question of it burning longer, we have grama. Now, grama hopefully will be a share for itself. It's a fascinating sugya. It's not a halachos, but I can just tell you that the Marmakaimis, the Ramon Tafkuf Yudal Sif Gimel, says that grama on Yomtov is mutter, even though he speaks about kibui, but who are the navara. Rabbi Yoel, one of the Rishonim, holds grama on Yomtov is asa. The Mishnah is makel that grama on Yomtov is mutter, and the Chazon Ish is machmer. But one thing I will say, that before you make a grama, make sure it's not more than a grama. If there's a mechanical, oven, it's easier to do. If there's a electronic oven that has a digital display, raising the temperature is at least changing the digital display, and it's a problem. Next question, opening a fridge on Shabbos or Yomtov versus Shabbos. So the truth is, many people are machmer, only open the fridge when the element is on, when the motor is working, because they're afraid when they open the fridge, it might put on the motor. Okay. Now, Rabbi Zalman held it was mutter. I'm not getting into that now. The question is, on Yomtov, is there any more tzad lahakol to open a fridge even when the motor is off? So, if you believe that opening is a psik reisha, they're going to put the refrigerator on, there's no heta. You're putting on the motor of the refrigerator. That's havar d'rabbanan. But if the most, it's a grama, you're going to put it on, it's going to go on sooner, because now there's induction of hot air in the refrigerator, we'll put the refrigerator on sooner. So on Shabbos, there's a tzatmi machmer fashtetzach. Grama on Shabbos also. But on Yom Tov, grama is mutter. So if you know your refrigerator is not so hypersensitive, it will not go on the spot. If just going to be a delay, then if you go with those shittas that the grama on Yom Tov is mutter, it will be okay. You'll have a problem. Rabbi Yashiv is quoted as saying you can't, the halachos on Yom Tov are fridge is like Shabbos, but if you look at his lashon, he says because if you open it, you're putting it on, and putting it on, there's no heta on Yom Tov versus Shabbos. So obviously he's talking about a refrigerator, that's a psik reisha. Now opening an oven on Yom Tov is a little more of an issue, and I'll tell you why. Because opening an oven on Yom Tov, when the fire is on, there's no problem, because the fire is on. When the fire is off, again, don't forget everything works with a thermostat. When the fire is off, opening the oven door could be a psik reisha, because don't forget, the oven is set for 350, whatever it is, right? The room temperature is 70 degrees, whatever it is. So the sudden change from 350 to 70 might trigger the oven to go on. So that's why it's advisable, certainly, on an oven on Shabbos to open the oven only when the heating element is on. How do I know? Either look and see, or if there's a light indicator, you could tell. Now, plus, if Khalil, the oven goes on, when you open it, that's a malacha deraisa of avara. Avara on Yom Tov deraisa, on Shabbos deraisa. Yom Tov, you might say, well, it's only a suffix d'rabbanan, because the oven, at most, avara is only d'rabbanan. But then again, if it's carved to a vadai, so it's like a real avara, you're putting on the oven. So you have to know your particular oven, but we could say there's slightly more of a tzad lahakol regarding ovens more than on Yom Tov more than Shabbos. Obviously, if you have an oven still that has a pilot, so you're lucky, because then even in the worst scenario that the opening the oven door puts on the oven, it's eish mi eish and is mutter. Just like you could put on the oven, you could open the door. So again, you have to know the metzias and approach, properly. Ice cube maker that people have, so obviously it's not bishul, but it's you're activating that mechanism that creates the ice or transfers the ice. So you have to know the metzias. There's no one cloud, but you have to be a very much an educated consumer. Let me tell you another ma'aseh shehaya that happens quite often. And I'll just show you in a moment what I mean. See, many people have either an air conditioner built in, a timer built into the air conditioner, or they have a timer they put in the outlet, and very often everything was set. It's supposed to go on tomorrow morning for davening, 8 o'clock. The action will go on. It's going to be gewaldig. Now, many shuls have to make it easier to work with the air conditioner, they have a switch, a manual switch. Now, the air conditioner is set, and you put on the switch, the air conditioner goes on. Off the switch, it goes off. Here they don't have it, but many shuls have it. And they don't use the air conditioner because you have to climb up. It's very hard. They make an accessible switch. Now, someone set up the air conditioner. Everything is great. Time is great. But he forgot to put the switch on, the manual switch. So either the timer is going to go and not put it on, or the timer's not even going. So you want to know, can he just, tonight, just move with his hand, no muktzah, move the switch from off to on. So I said, what's the heter? Grama. He's right. Putting on a switch tonight is doing absolutely nothing. Another 12 hours, whatever it is, tomorrow morning to go on at 8 o'clock. Very good. So what I told him, the problem is that if you notice, you set the timer at 6 o'clock, and what does the time say? 6 o'clock. You know why? Because sometimes when the switch is off, the timer is not working. The timer is part of the appliance, and the appliance is off because the switch is off. So by hitting the switch, you're causing a grumma for the air conditioner tomorrow, but you're putting on right now the timer. But I could say, if you figured out your system, and you know exactly what's doing, and you have a way of just moving a switch, avoiding muktzah, and it does nothing at the time, just tomorrow the air conditioner will trigger the time will trigger that air conditioner to go on, that might be a grum. Now the problem is grum is a little more complicated because beguf hadava, but I think we can take it bisaymich like that, and certainly aidi akum that would be mutter, because by akum, as we said, even putting it on is mutter. Regarding refilling an urn is another beautiful example. Now let me explain. People did everything right, and it worked. They had an urn, but they had plenty of hot water. The shul was night, they drank a lot of hot drinks. Lamaisa, then they want to fill it up on Yomtov Sheni for Yomtov Sheni. Can you add cold water to an urn that's working well, but it's almost at the end? So everybody right away thinks about the light. Now what's the problem with the light? If you put in a lot of cold water, so the serve light button goes off. So you're making keyboy on a light. Okay, I could live with that. I mean, that's a problem. I can live with that. You know, it's a much more serious problem. The fact is, when you have an urn, especially when it's very little water, so the water is quite hot because it's not much to keep it hot. So you could almost be guaranteed that right now there's only one coil that's keeping the water hot. Now, when you throw in a half a gallon of water or more, boys, they're panicking that urn. They can't deal with that. So it's a psik ratio that take it from a yad. You're putting on the second coil. It's tantamount to putting on an urn. It's a psik ratio that the induction of so much cold water is going to put on the second coil. So it's not adding to the fire. You're creating an independent, separate coil on Yomtov. And that's why it's taka problem. So what you could do is, and this is pretty rare, you have to have patience, but if you hear or see that right now it's both on, because right now it's reboiling for whatever reason, so that once both are on, you can't get worse. So once you know that both coils are going, that's the regular and the reboil, so you can add all the cold water. It's hard to know, but you could know, but more often when the water is so little, it's typically not on. But once it's on, you could do what you want. Now, the light is a problem, but the light is basically a gas, so it's a lesser problem. Now, what many people do to be safe, they boil the water on the stovetop with a kettle, and then they add it to the urn. Of course, that's no problem, because it's not going to change the temperature that drastically, so you won't put on the second coil. There are some urns that have a Yomtov feature, Yomtov mode, and I want to explain a little of the Metzias, and you could decide accordingly.
While the light is on, that means that it's working now. Why can't you add water?
It doesn't mean both are working. Light is on means that it's hot, not that it's boiling. Yeah, if you go home, you have a little time, you can figure it out. It's pashut. You have to have both coils on. Now, next question is they have the Yomtov mode. Let me explain. One feature that is definitely commendable is that the light stays on no matter what. When it's boiling, not boiling, you sort of disable the light movement. So the light's not a problem. But how do they deal with the problem? How could you put cold water into this urn? You're putting a tavara. So they designed a type of grama situation that no matter how much cold water you throw in a gallon of cold water, it will not go on right away. It's basically an implanted, delayed reaction that it takes time for the coils to go on. So, grama, like thermal, is mutter. Now, I'm not saying all of them like this. This is the one that I studied. And again, I'm absolutely not talking about all of them. I'm talking the one I saw. And this is questionable. Number one, I mean, it's not questionable, but like thermal is mutter, but like the you have a problem. But perhaps a more serious problem when something is a grama, it means it's not the way to put it on. If this was designed to turn a grama, to turn a mice into a grama, already Rabbi Moshe said that he didn't like the grama devices because that's the way to put it on. So the fact that it's a delay is definitely not right away. And some taka were not too excited about that. Now, what should you buy? I'll tell you the best piece of advice. Be an educated consumer and find out. If you like the heta that they have, fine. But just to buy Yomtov mode, you have to know what it's really based on. Let me leave a few more shilas. If a person's bedroom light was left on and he can't sleep at night, or typically in sukkahs the lights, they forgot to put a timer in and he can't sleep in the sukkah with the lights on. So for you to close the lights on Yomtov, then it's the rabbanon of kibui. But to call a guy is certainly mutter, because even for a guy to do malacha deraisa is mutter, and here, even to a kibui, even havara is mutter. This is no different. Lamais, I can't sleep, so a sleepless night is going to be very detrimental. And that's also why if a person has a mitztayer harbi l'moshel, it's got very hot on sukkahs and he can't bear to be without air conditioning. So to call the guy to put on the air conditioning will be okay. If the kitchen is unbearably hot because the oven is going and the stovetop is going, and Lamais is the second day Yomtov, and you finish through that at 1 o'clock, and long afternoon, you can't see staying in the house. I'm talking an extreme case because otherwise it shouldn't be done. Then you could call a guy to close the oven and close the stovetop. Why? Because it's a shvus to shvus, b'makayim tzorah gadol. Now, the tzorah gadol is not saving the few cents of the gas that you're consuming. You're talking about a mitztayer. If someone's not a mitztayer, so follow Minhag Yisrael and keep it going. But certainly, last but not least, but I found this absolutely amazing, is the question of the urns that today we call the shul's urns, the big urns that the shuls have. Now, this is something that's really delightful to understand. A regular urn, there's no autofill. So, using an urn on Shabbos poses no problem. You take out the water, once you finish, it's finished. Shuls typically, commercial urns typically have an autofill. So, on Shabbos, you can't use that. Not because the hot water is a problem, because when you take out a cup, a cold water comes. It's my mom's not using the hot water from the sink, which is a bishul deraisa. You're putting water into a big ambatya, and it happens to be a psikration, not just a grum. Fine. So what do you do on Shabbos? So you disable the autofill. Now, Yomtiv, a regular autofill shouldn't be a problem, because autofill just means bishul. Bishul Yomtiv is perfectly mutter. But we live in a world of advanced technology, and it's possible to have a regular fill. Now, the original fills was basically a mechanical operation. Pardon me, it's something that had a floater, pardon me, like in the basic kisei, and when the water level dropped, it signaled to bring more water. But today, everything has to be a little better. They have an electric eye in the water, a floater it's called, and when it senses even the drop of water, a drop of the measure of the water, even a millimeter of water that goes down, it triggers the autofill electronically. So taking out water, a few ounces of water even, will activate this electrical eye to send a message to electronically feed water. So that's a problem on Yom Tov. Shabbos and Yom Tov, even Yom Tov is a problem. So that's why they have, and today it's made by Hamish Yidden. They have a choil and Shabbos, which of course includes Yom Tov. Basically, what they do is they could disable the electrical part of it, and now you're back to either a mechanical, which is no problem on Yom Tov, or a nothing. On Shabbos, you can't have any type of refill. The question is, and I asked someone that designs these things, can you close, let's say you forgot to change it from choil mode to Yom Tov mode, and to the Yom Tov. So can you just move it from the choil to the Yom Tov mode? That's a problem. Because on the choil mode, it's electric, the electric is going. Closing it, you're closing that current. So again, the klal is, if you know what you're doing, don't do anything. But lamaisa, if you do know what you're doing, you could have a simchas Yom Tov. Thank you for coming. I could Yom Tov to you all. Okay.
Shame you should tell like to be a shikach or Smith for today's year. And I ben kasher maar te gaan bogen de zaak is dat ze figure hebben om te met ze nemen alle nog af is maar zit kai. Ja, ik wil zeggen ja.
Hey.
Hey. Everybody say, let's keep the lights on a few more minutes.
Reboil.
Keep it boiling. Seek them under the lights again.
We're going to try to reboil the share today and have the tamtzis. Basically, we have to realize that you have to know the halachos and you have to know the metzias. Yom Tov is like Shabbos, like Torah says, Twive, Leisasakam Malacha, Oichel Nefesh, or Mitoich is Mutter. One of the primary examples of the Heter Gomor on Yom Tov is Havara. Havara on Yom Tov is Mutter. It's based on the Pasuk, like the Mechilta, Yisvayish, B'cham Ha'shechem Yom HaShabbos. Yom Tov, you're allowed to midaraisa create a fire and transfer a fire. But midrabanan, Chazal said that moilid is a problem, and creating a fire is nisdarabanan of moilid. But once you have any existing flame, even a small candlelight, you could light up the biggest fireplace and have heat and have ways to cook, because transferring versus creating. The best example is the old type of stovetops where there was a pilot you're allowed to put on the fire because you're not creating, you're transferring. But electric ignition means you are creating a new fire. If you have an electric ignition, you could either, if you could bypass the clicking entirely because you don't push it in, then you're not using electric ignition. Or if the plug is out, then you're just feeding gas. Then be careful, but you could take a match, you could take a candle and ignite it through the candle. That would be Moisif Eish. If someone put on appliance b'shoigig on Yom Tov, you could use the appliance and the food of it. On Shabbos, it would be a problem. You're allowed to call a guy to do any malacha of havara, because at the worst scenario, it's the rabbanon, and the makayim shvus to shvus, a mir la'akam would be mutter. Basically, putting on a heater would be mutter l'tzarich Yom Tov. That's the same shvus to shvus. Striking a match, all agree except the Shalom Eshe, but all agree that is awesome. Lighting the match from an existing fire, many poskim are makel, some hold even that's a problem, but the poskim seem to be makel. Lighting from a hot coil, electric appliance, Ramesh was makel, others were machmir. If it's not into the fire, but you're keeping it above, it's the heat of the fire or from the element, that's a problem, because that's the heat, not the fire. Using a lighter or a cinder, the old-fashioned new type is definitely an asa als moilid. Yomtov, electricity is awesome. The Aruch HaShulchan was not a shita, he was misinformed. Electricity is an issur of moilid at least, like the Chazanish could even be boina. But once it's on, using a humidifier, a vaporizer on Yomtov is perfectly okay. The bishul is not a problem on Yomtov. Changing the setting of a dimmer, a light dimmer, we did see there are those on Makel, some shy away from doing any increase of electricity, because that might be a new type of moilid, even though it was going already. Any oven that has a digital display, so any change in temperature is a problem. But if you have an oven without a digital display, raising the temperature with if nothing happens right away, it just stays on longer, that could be a grama that's mutter. If you turn a fan or a crock pot from low to high, so effectively you're closing the low and putting on the high, that's an independent problem. The reboil button of a urn is a new coil, a new havara. So you have to again know the Metzias very well. But basically, a new coil is a new havara mamish. Raising the setting in of an oven, if there's no digital display and it's not raising the fire itself, would be okay, as we said, like most shitas. To cause it to stay on longer is a grama, and there are Moaz Mekel, those that are machmer, have Rabbeinu Yoel to be concerned with. Opening a fridge on Yom Tov is a little more mutter than on Shabbos. Opening an oven is also slightly more mutter than opening it on Shabbos. Ice cube maker, any of these type of new additions to a refrigerator, which are sometimes you have to figure them out, but basically that should be a problem on Yom Tov like Shabbos, because it's a psikreisha, it's an avara, mamish biyadayim. Adjusting the timer that's off, because the switch is off, so putting on the switch is putting on the timer, and you have to be careful. That would only be muta aydei akum. Refilling an urn where the light goes off is one problem, but the real problem is the coil is being ignited, so you have to make sure that either put it on when the light is on, because then the light is on means the boil is going, and you can't make it worse. Closing lights in a bedroom or a sukkah when someone can't sleep, aydei akum is perfectly muta. The stove top, if you want to close it because it's just unbearably hot and there's a real tsar, you could be makel, aydei akum that is. And the big commercial urns know what you're dealing with. You have to make sure that it's on Yom Tov mode. If not, closing the Yom Tov, putting it onto Yom Tov mode could be malacha for itself. And basically, if there's an autofill that's totally mechanical, that can be used on Yom Tov.